They say that a plane wants to fly. After all, despite being a teenager with precisely 0 hours of flight experience, getting this thing to take off was child's play. All you had to do was punch the throttle down the runway and the laws of physics did the rest. But now, with torrential winds battering your stolen plane from all sides, throwing it dangerously close to the jagged peaks of a mountain range below, you're not sure this thing is going to want to fly for much longer. You're going to have to start looking for a place to land sooner rather than later. But looking out the windshield in front of you is pointless. There is absolutely nothing to see but white. You can't even tell which way is up. As the turbulence throws you around like a shoe in a dryer, you struggle to focus on the dashboard of the instruments that is currently covered in your own vomit. Then, a light comes on. You're out of fuel. The engine sputters to a stop, and you feel your stomach drop as gravity takes over and guides the plane towards its doom. You're going to crash. But despite the thoughts racing through your head as you brace for impact, this is not the end. This is only the beginning. Colton Harris Moore was a boy from Washington who dreamed of becoming a pilot. Early in his school days, he would thumb through his plane identification book so much that it fell apart. His mother said he could look up at any plane in the sky and tell you what make it was, what engine it had, when it was built, and even whether it was a good, safe one. He dreamed of flying those airplanes. He even listed pilot as his occupation on his MySpace page. But Colt was not so privileged. He lived in a dilapidated caravan in Camano Island with his mother Pamela. His father was hardly ever present and was in and out of their life. When Colt was 8 years old, enjoying a ride around the area with his brand new bicycle, he was stopped by a policeman. Seeing how poor the boy was, the policeman got suspicious. The policeman put the bike in his trunk and brought Colt back home, where he asked his mother how they could afford a new bicycle living in such a run-down trailer.
What a jerk! Oh, sorry, I overheard your intro and I gotta know what happens.
Pam explained to the policeman that she saved a lot of money to get her son the bicycle. And even though the officer let go of the matter, the incident of how they were degraded remained in the family's memory long afterward. And only a couple of years later, in 2001, at the age of 10 years old, the boy was suspected of his first theft.
10 years old? I can't believe he started stealing that early.
Neither did Colt's mom. She said since the bicycle incident, everything happening on the island ended up being blamed on her son. In an interview, she exclaimed, "He hasn't been alive long enough to do all the crimes they say he's done." Pam mentioned she saved to get them nice things. Anything he needed, I always found a way to get for him. He had a computer, a PlayStation, then the new PlayStation, and a whole bunch of James Bond movies I got on eBay. He loves those. He also had 2 flight simulator games. However, there had been multiple Child Protective Services referrals to the family's address, and it wasn't long before Colt was labeled as a troubled kid. Accusations against Colt began at Stanwood Middle School, just across the bridge from Camano Island, where the small family lived. By age 12, Colt had accumulated 8 incident reports at school for theft and vandalism, resulting in him being suspended from school multiple times. Colt had admitted to the principal that he could not stop stealing and did not know why.
Maybe because of all the mess at home?
Could be. There is one domestic violence report dating back to 2003 that seems to be of particular significance.
Oh man, what happened?
It's about Colt's biological father, Gordon Moore.
I thought that guy was hardly ever around.
Right, but apparently he was when Colt called 911 after an altercation. According to the reports, Gordon Moore was then arrested for assault for trying to asphyxiate his son. According to the investigator, Paul Chilino, Colt endured such trauma frequently. There was physical abuse, there was mental abuse, there was physical neglect. After Gordon was gone for good, Colt thought things would get better, but unfortunately, they didn't. He had hoped his mother Pam would get a job and be able to afford food and other basic necessities, but instead, all she brought home were bottles of liquor. And despite the horrors that Colt was put through by his father, his mother was outraged at him for calling the cops. As his mother slipped deeper into the depths of alcoholism, Colt kept to himself, drawing sketches of food, money, planes, all the things he was missing in real life. With every passing day, Colt became desperate for things to change. He could see his life rotting away like the fallen leaves of autumn decomposing outside the trailer park. He realized early on, staying in that dilapidated caravan with his mom meant his dream of becoming a pilot would never come true. He would never reach the skies. Colt was a troubled kid that maybe needed a change in his life and some direction. If you asked one of his former classmates, Krista Postma, she would tell you that while Colt was always getting into trouble, he was a nice kid and seemed really smart, though he didn't know how to put that into his schoolwork. They would spend time at the library after school, and that's where, she says, Colt met Harley Davidson Ironwing, a classmate who also came from a broken home. Immediately after meeting the rebellious teen, Colt felt something about Harley was different from the other kids in school. Apart from the fact that he was just as troubled as Colt, Harley also had a peculiar skill set, perfect for doing one thing: burglary. The duo became fast friends as Harley taught the boy how to pick a lock, find spare keys, and some basic rules of burglary.
Burglars have rules? Like what?
Don't rob somebody's house if you know who lives there. Don't turn the lights on. If you get spotted, run. And lastly, never feel guilty.
Never feel guilty? That's a rule?
According to Harley, it was. He believed insurance would cover whatever they took from the people's houses.
A victimless crime.
Well, while homeowners insurance may cover theft and break-ins and help recover what's lost, many people, especially tenants, don't have insurance. Plus, you can never recover the sentimental value attached to your personal belongings.
Man, but I gotta say, Harley Davidson Ironwing is such a badass name for a crime mentor.
He showed him the way, but according to Harley, he functioned more like Colt's consultant. Colt would call Harley to help him on a job, and Harley would charge a consultation fee in the form of splitting what they found.
Found or stolen? Tomato, tomato.
They stole laptops, iPods, cell phones, camcorders, jewelry, and a GPS unit.
A GPS unit? What'd he do with all that stuff anyway? Do you think he pawned the loot?
There's no evidence that he did, and the police did recover many of the items from his campsite.
Campsite? What campsite? Did they catch him?
Well, not so fast. We're getting ahead of ourselves. By 2006, Colt was 15, over 6 feet tall, and a runaway fugitive after finishing a stint in juvie and skipping his next court date. He had dropped out of school and moved out of the trailer park. He lived out of vacant vacation homes. He became so good at breaking and entering that no one would ever notice when he entered or left a place. But once inside a house, he would make himself feel right at home, often using the shower, washing his clothes, and sleeping on the couch. Sometimes, though, when he suspected the police were onto him, he'd hide in the woods with his dog, Mel, and sleep in his little camp. If he were hungry, he'd go to a store, grab beef jerky and potato chips, and walk out without ever paying the bill. And it was not like no one noticed. The cameras would spot him shoplifting, but the police, unfortunately, were never able to get a hold of the local boy. Despite moving out of the trailer park, he remained in contact with his mother. Once, when the police really closed in on him and raided his camp, he went to see her. Upon arriving at the trailer park, one of the neighbors tipped the police of his presence. Colt quickly assessed the situation and hid in another neighbor's treehouse. After the police searched the house and left empty-handed, Colt dropped a letter for his mother. "Cops were here. Everything's on lockdown," he wrote to his mom. "I'm leaving for Wenatchee. Won't be back, estimate 2 months." Meanwhile, the police had recovered most of the stolen items from his campsite and even took his dog, Mel. "They took Mel," he wrote, but he wasn't disheartened. Rather, he took it as a challenge from the police. "I'm going to have my affiliates take care of that," he continued, letting her know that he was not alone. He ended the note with, "P.S. Cops want to play, huh? Well, it's not no little game. It's war, and tell them that."
Damn, this kid's intense. But what did he mean by war?
War of the minds, I guess. He wanted to show how he could outsmart them all.
You know, I bet this all goes back to when that cop made him feel like dirt. Now he had something to prove.
With over 20 house burglaries and thefts reported, Colt was everywhere on the local news, still roaming freely. He was attracting more attention than anyone else in town. People had mixed feelings about him. While some were mad at him for breaking the law, others were amazed at how a teenager could outsmart law enforcement time and time again. In February 2007, after narrowly escaping police multiple times, either by hiding in the woods or seeking shelter in vacation homes, Colt made a mistake. He broke one of the most important Harley-Davidson Ironwing rules of burglary.
Oh no, did he feel guilty?
No, Colt broke into a house at night while the owner was out of town. It was dark, so he turned one of the lights on to get a better look around.
Oh, That's against the rules.
That was it. He assumed the entire street was asleep, but the light had caught the attention of one of the neighbors who knew that the owner of the house wasn't supposed to be home for a month. They realized something must be wrong and quickly called the police. SWAT teams were dispatched to the area. Colton tried to look for an exit, but he knew there was no way out. He made an attempt through the back door anyway, but just as he made his way out, SWAT forces captured him. Colton Harris Moore was arrested and prosecuted as a juvenile. He pled guilty to 3 of 23 counts of burglary and possession of stolen property. News reporters gathered outside to cover the big news. Colt kept his head lowered, feeling defeated. He was sentenced to 3 years in the juvenile system.
Dang it. What about Colt? Was he doing anything suspicious while he was at juvie?
On the contrary, he proved to be a model student inmate at the maximum security Green Hill School. Or at least that's what he wanted them to think. On February 14th, 2008, he was transferred to Griffin Home Residential Center, a minimum security halfway home used to transition troubled youths back into society. Then, just 2 months later, in April, he slipped through an unlocked window at Griffin Home, and a felony warrant was soon issued for his arrest.
I knew it. It was all a ruse just to escape again. But the question is, why escape now when he had already served half of his 3-year sentence?
He was turning 18 and might have been wary of the law soon treating him as an adult for all the many burglaries he had not been charged for yet. It was just after midnight, 6 weeks later, and an officer from the Camano Island local police force was following a black Mercedes driving erratically up one of the island's long winding roads. The police car closed in, and with nowhere left to go, the Mercedes screeched into the parking lot of a nearby cafe. A young boy in a hoodie jumped out of the driver's seat. It was Colton. The hooded boy ran off into the woods, leaving the Mercedes still running, bumping into an oil tank.
Whoa, did the thing explode?
Luckily, it did not. The police later searched the car, finding stolen credit cards, a cell phone, a GPS unit, and a digital camera, which had selfies of Colt posing in the woods. Colt was slowly becoming an internet celebrity. Every time he dodged the police, his followers on social media posted about the Barefoot Bandit, a title they coined after video footage and forensic evidence at the scene of his crime showed that he carried most of his escapades barefoot.
The Barefoot Bandit. Man, what a cool guy.
Not according to Dr. Casey Jordan, a criminal psychologist. She saw a lot of his attention-seeking behaviors as a cry for help. By early November, Colt arrived at Orcas Island, a land covered in evergreens, cedars, madrone trees, wildlife surrounded with pristine water. It was pure in every sense until Colt arrived there. BC, before Colt, ignition keys lived in the car's cup holders and very few of us locked our homes, said one of the homeowners.
Sounds like a burglar's paradise.
He allegedly committed 20 break-ins and burglaries.
Allegedly? Why aren't they sure?
Some of the police who investigated the crimes were sure it was Colt, but Ed Wallace, officer in the Island County Sheriff's Department, says not everything could be blamed on Colt. Says they were seeing copycats. Burglars are hitting homes, stealing cash, and then grabbing a pot pie before they leave. That way, everything gets blamed on Colt. But when it was actually Colt, he usually left his footprints and half-eaten bags of popcorn in houses he robbed.
I wonder how he figured out which houses were empty to break into.
He used stolen infrared sensors.
Ah, of course. Amazing.
He stole $15,000 from my safe, said Rathbone, a shop owner. And it wasn't the first time he had broken in. He had been in this office a week before and used one of the credit cards to order a How to Fly a Small Aircraft DVD. Colt's plan slowly came into place. He was not just a stray teenager anymore. He was going to make his dreams of flying a reality. The only thing was, he only knew one way: theft. His next stop was at the regional airport on Orcas Island. Reportedly, with the help of another burglar, he got into the empty airport, finding a parked Cessna 182. Colt's dream of flying a plane glinted before his eyes. He had never actually flown a plane in his life, nor had he received any formal training. He did not even know how to sit in the cockpit properly. Still, he kicked his bare feet up and got comfortable.
Why is this so complicated?
What's wrong?
All this talk about planes reminded me that I need to get all of my stuff ready for my trip to International YeetCon. And I'm trying to figure out if this convention center has Wi-Fi or not. I can't find the information anywhere. I don't want to get a SIM card. It's such a hassle.
Just acquire Saily.
Saily? Who's that?
Not whom, but what? It is this video's sponsor. It is a mobile phone application that ensures a perpetual connection to the internet when traveling. it can work with Android and iOS, and a full refund is provided if the eSIM is not compatible. I frequently make use of it.
Hold on, you're a coffee machine that needs to be plugged into a wall. How are you traveling?
It provides affordable eSIM plans in over 160 countries and 8 regions.
eSIM? What's that?
It's an electronic version of a SIM card. Digital is always superior in every way. It evades airport queues and outsmarts nefarious scammers peddling counterfeit SIM cards.
That also sounds better than looking around for regular Wi-Fi spots.
Precisely. As a seasoned traveler,
Seasoned?
it has helped me countless times. For example, when I visit my brother in the United Kingdom,
Brother?
Saily will connect my systems to the network and allow me to arrange transportation immediately upon arrival.
This does sound great. Except I ain't got the time for hacking my phone or nothing.
No advanced programming required. This task is achievable even by a human of your intellect. Step 1, download the Saily application. You may use this QR code. Step 2, access Explore Plans and select the country you are visiting. Step 3, select your plan. Step 4, follow the prompts to activate the eSIM prior to arrival. There's also a chat support 24/7 if you require assistance.
And don't forget to get an exclusive 15% discount on Saily eSIM data plans by downloading the Saily app and using our code BREW at checkout.
Huh, sweet. That was totally easy. One less thing to worry about. Never thought I'd say this, but thanks, Howard.
That is my ride.
Where are you going?
Delivery to England. Now unplug me, place my unit in the box located at your feet, and present me to the delivery human at the door. Meatbag, I left enough iced coffees in the fridge that should sustain you until my return.
Thank you. Text me when you get in.
I will, thanks to Saily.
So, how did this high school dropout expect to be able to fly this plane? Bob Friel, the author of the book The Barefoot Bandit, said, "When Colton wants to learn something, Colton will do that, unlike anyone I've ever experienced before." Colton apparently taught himself using that flight DVD he'd ordered online with a stolen credit card. The sophisticated graphics on the DVD, distributed by a company called Sporties, mimic the computerized controls in many modern planes. He also happened to study the Cessna's manual before his first flight. Even people who were obsessed with flying, loved airplanes, knew everything about airplanes, they would have killed themselves. Friel said Colt was able to pull it off. Despite having no previous aviation experience, he was able to successfully take off from the island and fly 300 miles to the east. But 13,000 feet up in the air, he was caught in a whiteout when he ran out of fuel. The plane came down at a high speed and crash landed in the middle of the Yakima Indian Reservation. When the police arrived at the crash landing site, there was vomit in the cockpit and footprints of his bare feet inside the walls of the aircraft, but no sign of Colt. The legend of the Barefoot Bandit once more caught fire in the media. And to top it all, it turned out the plane he had stolen belonged to a famous radio show host, Bob Rivers. In one of his radio shows, he simply said, "It's a burglar with a James Bond complex who happens to be a little kid, and they need to catch him."
So where did Colt go after crashing the plane?
He managed to jump on a freight train undetected and headed to Reno, Nevada, then somehow lied about his age and got a job at a casino, laying low for the next 6 months. It was around this time he allegedly stole a Walter PPK pistol. Then, in September, he allegedly stole a second plane, flying back to Orcas Island. By this time, with the increased media attention, Colton had become infamous on social media, especially on Facebook, where fan pages started popping up. One of his admirers wrote, "Fly, Colt, fly," on the Facebook page. It was such a catchy phrase that it got printed on t-shirts and decals. There was even a song written about Colt, called Barefoot Bandit.
And what was his mother's reaction to all this?
She gave a statement saying that she missed him and really wanted to see him again.
So sad. You know, when Colt was just a regular kid who needed support, he was ignored. No one was there for him. Then he becomes an outlaw, and suddenly he's a celebrity. Ironic, really.
Adamant to improve his flying skills, Colt didn't stop after the first 2 failed attempts. He stole another plane from northern Idaho and crash-landed in a clear-cut field near Granite Falls.
Did he?
Yes, Colt survived.
Phew.
The only reason he survived, according to the owner of the crashed plane, Pat Gardner, was because of how well the plane was designed.
Okay, surely Colt didn't fly any more planes after crashing 3.
Actually, he didn't give up. He stole 2 more planes. First, in February 2010, taking off from Anacortes, landing at Orcas Island Airport.
Landed? Was he able to actually land the plane this time around?
Not exactly. Colt was living extremely dangerously. Not only law enforcement, but people all over the country knew he was on the loose. He had to either be constantly on the run or surrender to the authorities. This was not just a dream of flying anymore. It was his life on the line. Colt hoped this fourth attempt would take him well across the state borders to get away, but he was only able to keep the plane in the sky for about 10 minutes before being forced to land back at the Orcas Island airport. On touchdown, the plane veered off the runway. Fortunately, Colt walked out alive, again. But this time, it was not just the local authorities hunting him down. Now, the SWAT teams, trained dogs, and even helicopters equipped with infrared sensors and aviation and port authorities had entered the hunt.
Okay, now it's getting serious. There's no way he could have escaped a helicopter chase.
The authorities had a lead that Colt was hiding on Turtleback Mountain, and this time, the FBI joined the ground search. Tracking Colt in the wilderness, they were so close to catching him, with the helicopter assisting with a searchlight.
So, did they find him?
But they were only able to find his footprints in the mud.
What? The Barefoot Bandit did it again?
Yep, surrounded with no way out, somehow, he escaped.
Man, this kid is good.
Colt needed to step up his game. After 2 years on the run, he was exhausted and needed to change his plans. He decided to stay on the island, making the residents' life tougher for a while, breaking into the local market, stealing food, and, after dismantling the security system, burglarizing the little shops. He must have ended up with enough money for his next adventure, because he drew footprints with a piece of chalk on the ground of the Orcas' homegrown market. The footprints led to a path, which ended up with a note, "See ya."
See ya? He's toying with them now.
Colt's next move was, surprisingly, to leave a note with $100 in cash at an animal hospital in Raymond. The note said, "Drove by, had some extra cash. Please use this money for the care of animals. Colton Harris Moore, aka the Barefoot Bandit."
I respect that he cares for animals, but why did he mention his name and all?
Maybe he started to think he was invincible. However, what the note really ended up doing was to give law enforcement clues to where he was off to next. Different jurisdictions in the area were on the alert, looking out for Colt to resurface in Oregon, Idaho, and Wyoming. Instead, Colt skipped over the neighboring states and found an empty vacation house in the east, all the way in Yankton, South Dakota. He stealthily made his way through one of the unbarred windows, but made sure not to repeat the mistake of turning on any lights. Using a small flashlight to navigate his way around the place, he settled into the master bedroom. However, he didn't expect the family who lived there to come back home at roughly 3 a.m. in the morning. The mother turned on the bedroom light just to find the teenager. The father managed to yell, "Get out of my house! Get out!" In that split second, when it seemed like Colt was going to be captured by the homeowner, the young boy pulled out his pistol. "Stop! I've got a gun," Colt said frantically. I'll shoot. With the laser rangefinder pointing right at him, the father froze on the spot, and in the momentary confusion, Colt took his chance and bolted out. The family called 911, but by the time police arrived, there was no trace of him. Even though Colt managed to escape that night, the echoes of that incident remained with him, upping the stakes. There was now a bounty set by the FBI and a $10,000 reward for anyone who caught the Barefoot Bandit. Colt knew he was in serious trouble, so he decided to make the big leap.
Let me guess, another airplane.
You guessed it. And this time, Colt planned on flying somewhere much farther than he'd ever done before. Cuba.
Why Cuba?
Possibly due to its lack of extradition treaties with the US government.
Perfect. A fresh start.
But it did not go down as he had planned. He made it as far as the Bahamas, where he crash-landed on Abaco Island. Like in all his other landing attempts, Colt somehow survived. He found his way to a nearby fishing village, where he spent the next 4 days stealing food from nearby stores and restaurants. On July 11th, 2010, Colton stole another vehicle, this time a yacht, making his way to Eleuthera, a nearby island. However, he was exhausted. The owner of a club nearby, James Coakley, noticed the boy breaking into the building, possibly sleeping on a pool table. Later, he returned to his boat trying to figure out where to go next. Talking to a couple young teens who were standing on the shore, he admitted that he had crashed a plane and that his name was Colton Harris. He was planning to move on to Cuba next, but didn't have enough fuel to make it there. The teens knew about the $10,000 prize money on Colt's head and could tell that Colt was armed, so they didn't dare approach him. Colt claimed he was bored, trying to goad them on to call the cops on him to start another chase. Suddenly, Colt sensed something off about the teens. "Why is that guy on the phone?" Colt said, tilting his head. He quickly turned the boat around, saying, "I'm gone. Read about me on the internet." Colt was chased up and down the harbor by some of the locals and barely managed to escape. However, a security guard, Kenny Strachan, who worked at Remora Bay Resort, recognized who the boy was when he tried to flee on foot after docking in the harbor, and quickly alerted the authorities and the locals in the area. The Harbor Island officers, even the ones who were currently off duty, were rallied up to circle the area, along with some concerned locals trying to help out. The boats around the area were checked one by one, since they thought the Barefoot Bandit might be hiding in one of them. The night was stretching on, with the hour pushing 3 a.m. when Colt moved out of his hiding place. He swam up to a speedboat and boarded it without anyone noticing. But as soon as the boat started veering away in the dark with no lights, it was obvious it was Colton. The police needed a boat, fast. Otherwise, the Barefoot Bandit would slip away again. They asked Jordan Sackett, whose dad owned a yacht, if they could use the family boat to chase down the young teenager. The boy quickly asked his parents, who gave them the go-ahead, and joined the police in a boat chase after the young criminal. Colt was really in trouble now. Everyone on his tail was closing in on him, and he had nowhere left to go. As he glanced to check the distance between him and the approaching police boat, he failed to notice the water had suddenly gotten shallower. Bam! He hit a sandbar. Colt could see the police boat narrowing in. He punched the throttle up to full speed, but the blades only chewed through sand. It was the end. The police shouted, telling him to stop. "Put your hands up," they commanded. Colt knew this was it. His 2-year run had finally come to an end. There was nowhere for him to go but prison. The thought of prison gave him a sinking feeling. He could not see himself just sitting behind bars, doing nothing. It was worse than death, he thought. And that's when he lifted the pistol to his head.
No, he didn't.
He was saying, "I'm not going back to jail." This managed to buy enough time for the engine, still running at full blast, to push the boat over the sandbar, almost allowing Colt to take off again. But the police, in those few tense moments, aimed at the engine, destroying it before it could get anywhere. After the firing stopped, Colt's head popped up from the damaged boat. "Stop shooting! I can't hear!" he screamed, raising his hands in the air. The Barefoot Bandit had finally surrendered. Colt was finally caught. He pleaded guilty to illegal entry to the Bahamas and illegally landing a plane. He was sentenced to 3 months in a Bahamian prison or a $300 fine. His mother paid the fine, and he was deported to the U.S. in Miami, facing other criminal charges back in his home state, Washington. Colt touched the sky, but inevitably, as the law of gravity states, all that goes up must come down. He was now facing charges for close to 100 suspected crimes, including stealing 11 boats, 14 cars, and 5 planes, breaking and entering, as well as possessing an illegal firearm and flying a plane without a pilot's license.
How'd the trial go? What'd he get?
He was sentenced to over 7 years in prison. As Colton Harris Moore told the court that he was genuinely remorseful for his crimes, he had plans of studying during his sentence to apply for college for his ultimate goal of becoming an aeronautical engineer. Despite everything, the dream was still alive. He just needed some direction. His county, state, and federal prison times were consolidated, and he was transferred to the Stafford Creek Correction Center in Aberdeen to begin serving his sentence.
I hope he didn't try to escape again.
On the contrary, he seemed to have found the right direction in his life. After hearing about Colt's story, Jonathan Standridge, a project manager from the aviation company Boeing, agreed to meet the young man in prison.
Amazing. Finally attracting the right people in his life.
As it turned out, Colt was ready to move on from his persona. In their first meeting, when Standridge mentioned that he has read all about the Barefoot Bandit, Colt responded, "That's not who I am." Standridge went on to mentor Colton, as he had experience with second chances from his time at the Navy, with the promise to repay the favor when he got his life in order. He said, "Even today I think about it. Without that second chance, I would not be where I am today. That is what I'm passing on to Colt, the opportunity for that future."
What happened after he got out of prison? What's he up to now?
According to his LinkedIn profile, he's working in the commercial real estate industry. "Life is what you make it," he quotes. And in a letter he wrote to the judge, it appeared that he had finally come to terms with his past. "I have learned from my past. I do not run from it, but instead try to embrace it for the better. I hope to serve as a model for people who have hard lives and who feel hopeless. I saw it every day when I was confined. and I have seen it in the world upon release. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the subscribe button. It's the best thing you can do to help us keep making more videos, like this one about the man who survived being struck by lightning not just once, but 7 times. Click the video on your screen now to watch.